Celeste LaCroix, the president of the League of Women Voters of Westport. First, I'd like to direct your attention to this table over on the right, my right, your left. This is where you'll find out all about things voting. You can pick up a lawn sign to remind your neighbors to vote. You can volunteer to give information to voters, especially about voting yes on the ballot initiative. You notice I'm shaking, which I always do. And backed by overwhelming demand, you can distribute I voted stickers, which we could not do during COVID, but we have 15,000 of them for the people of Westport. Like that, this program was made possible by Chief Organizer Betty Lynn White. Where is she? Okay, she's worked very hard. And we had Pat Corio and her team who edited and organized the questions that will be asked tonight. And of course, we all need to thank our moderator par excellence, who is Jean Rabideau. There she is, okay? In addition, I would like to acknowledge some of our longtime friends who are here with us tonight. We have Laura Smiths, who's the president of the State of Connecticut League of Women Voters. We have candidates who will not be debating tonight. We do have Lisa Wexler here, who's running for Judge of Probate. Do we have any other candidate that I haven't mentioned? Who? Oh, Patricia Russo. Okay, there she is. All right, you guys, I know we're all working very, very hard, okay? Programs like this are what we do locally, but we also work on a statewide and national level. The League of Women Voters submitted legal briefs in the 60 lawsuits that claim that the 2020 election was stolen. We won them all, okay? In doing so, it was estimated that we saved the votes of almost 25 million voters. That's what we do. Today we are involved in 27 different lawsuits nationally. And last night, a judge in Arizona agreed with the League of Women Voters that poll watchers, really just heavily armed thugs, masked and dressed in combat fatigues, that were taking photographs of the license plates of people dropping off their mail-in ballots, were intimidating voters. So we won that. Now, all of this, that's one for the good guys. So join us, and you can be a good guy too, all right? You can volunteer at the back table. Our first contest will be for State Senate District number 26, featuring the CC Mayor, the Democrat, and Tony Boucher. Jean, it's yours.
Thank you, Celeste. I'm going to go over the rules, but first I have a request to make for the audience. If you have a cell phone or any other device and you haven't muted it yet, please do so now, because we're recording and those things really get picked up on the mic. The other thing is, as you may or may not know, the League of Women Voters requests that nobody in the audience tape any part of the debate. The video of the debate will be available, but we would prefer not to see any parts of it on camera as part of a political ad. We're here to encourage the candidates to talk about the issues, not to do sound bites. That having been said, the rules for tonight are very simple. Neither candidate will be given an opening statement. Questions have been submitted, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Once a round of answers is completed, each candidate may have another minute to rebut something that was said by an opponent or to extend their own remarks. At the end of the period of each debate, each candidate will get a 2-minute closing statement. If there is time between the regular questions and the time allotted for the closing statements, we do have a sneaky number of yes or no questions that we will ask the candidates to simply answer by holding up a sign. If there are no questions, I should announce that the candidates drew for who would go first on the first question And Ms. Marr drew first, Ms. Boucher second. On the second question, Ms. Boucher will be first and Ms. Marr will be second, and so on. First question is, what is the most significant issue facing Connecticut? Explain your position on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight, and also thanks to the League of Women Voters and to the Westport Library. There are so many issues out in front of Connecticut right now, and I think that I'm just going to talk a little bit about them because this is a district-wide race, not just a town-wide race. One of the things, though, that we see is climate change. Climate change is an enormous existential threat to our communities, certainly to the inland with the extreme weather conditions, with the floodings that have happened, but more important is our coastal communities, the parts of our district where we have loved, where the beaches and the waterways and the river that flows right outside the doors here. We have to protect our climate. We have to work on climate change. And that goes across all of the towns in the district. I know probably people were thinking that I was going to say inflation, but in fact, inflation started when Putin, well, it started with the supplies chain, but then went into when Putin attacked Ukraine. And we started to see costs going up everywhere because we weren't getting the goods and services that we need. And now this winter, we're going to be seeing energy going up, and it's going to be a really tough winter. So going back to the climate side of things, I would really like to see us working towards renewable energies. My biggest fear this winter is people will be cold because of nat gas and the fact that we are not going to be having enough of the natural gas powering our electric utilities.
All right, thank you. Ms. Boucher.
What I am finding when I talk to thousands of people throughout the district is that they're mostly concerned about the fact that Connecticut has become unaffordable for them. High costs, taxes, energy, oil, gas, electricity, food. Our state's housing, electricity, and health insurance and infrastructure costs are also some of the highest in the country, with double-digit increases each year, and we're even staring at a 25% increase in our energy costs later on at the end of this year. This is a great concern to everyone. We have seen that the state has put an extra 1% tax on restaurant food and prepared foods in your grocery store. They've also added a much larger diesel fuel tax, which does affect the price of fuel or any other goods and services that are sent through our state. And that is even when trucks have to pay a pass-through tax in addition to that diesel fuel. So for me, it is addressing those higher costs. For me, it would be to eliminate that 1% on our restaurant food, to stop the 23% diesel fuel increase, because it does affect everybody's home budgets and their food costs, for sure. Having said that, I do believe also that education is key to our area, that education should be protected in Westport, that children have lost 2 years of learning in reading and in math. We should direct ARPA funds for remediation to address that. We also have to address the housing issues. Hartford has become heavy-handed with expanding 8-30G, and those are some of the issues that I find that people are talking to me all the time. Notwithstanding, I get several calls from Westport. They're very concerned about crime and their cars being burglarized right out of their driveways. This is a huge concern. There was the most anti-police bill in the country passed last year.
Okay, thank you. Anything further on this, Ms. Marr?
Sure. I just want to say that in the 6,000 doors that my campaign has knocked, and the many, many, many conversations that I have had on the doors, there are 2 things beyond climate, and believe me, I am hearing climate from the people at the doors. I'm hearing it especially for the younger families who are very concerned about the future for their children. But the other 2 things that I have heard consistently is fundamental rights, women's choice, and gun violence prevention. So many parents are so concerned about gun violence, about safe classrooms, about their children's mental health when they have to have safety drills. We must do more in this state for guns. We must get guns off of the streets, out of the classrooms, and out of the hands of people who are frightening the families that live in Connecticut and around the country.
Ms. Boucher, anything further?
Yes, very briefly, I also agree that a woman's right to choose, women's rights in general, are also of a concern, not just for women, but for men as well. The good news is Connecticut has codified pro-choice legislation in our state. Many of us on both sides of the aisle worked hard to make sure that that is kept in Connecticut, and the legislature even additionally strengthened that just last year. I would propose that we have a constitutional amendment in Connecticut to really solidify that in the next legislative session.
All right, thank you both. Next question goes to Ms. Boucher first. We got a couple of questions on education. This one is, what role, if any, should the state play in addressing the lower results on student standardized testing because of the pandemic?
Jean, because your microphone is a little bit muted, could you repeat that question one more time? I'm only catching half of what you're saying.
My apologies. Is this better? Yes, all right. What role, if any, should the state play in addressing the lower results on student standardized testing because of the pandemic?
Well, there has been much being written recently. We've all seen it. You know, we live in a phenomenal part of Connecticut. Most of the towns in District 26 have some of the top high schools in the entire state. Some of them in the country, and Westport stands out above the rest. It is one of the reasons I first ran for office, served on the Board of Ed, was chairman, served on the State Board of Ed, Education Committee of the House and Senate. So for me, it is a critical issue. There's a lot to be concerned about. SAT scores are down, but so is reading and math at all grade levels. I've even talked to college professors who are worried about the incoming freshmen, that they seem to be needier, they seem to need more help, that we do need remediation. As I said just a minute ago, we should be looking at the ARPA funds, not to build athletic facilities. We should be using them to remediate the lost learning that has occurred in the last 2 years. This is very important. We also don't need to regionalize our schools, and when people say, well, that's off the table, it's not. Former Speaker Sharkey just this June talked about his goal is to regionalize, and it always has been his goal. So we need to worry about that because that is something that is not favored by either side of the aisle and parents in our area. That having said, we also need to invest in underperforming schools, have more rigorous curriculum, and provide teachers with more tools to help the next generation thrive in a 21st century economy. So a lot of focus should be put on that. That is where we should put our investment. I think ARPA funds could help, but also states should be investing as well.
Okay, same question, Ms. Moore?
So I've had a lot of experience, not at the board level, but more at the hands-on level with education. I ran the Horizons National Student Enrichment Program for 5 years. It was a national program giving access to children to giving access for children to education, children from underserved schools. And then when I was at Person to Person, I was making sure that in the summertime, children did not have the summer melt and that they actually got enrichment and they went to camps. And then I set in place a mentoring program, sending students to college so that they would graduate in 4 years with a job and with reduced debt, trying to reduce that 6-year graduation rate. And then at Sandy Hook Promise, I was working with schools and classrooms trying to keep them safe from gun violence and prevent the fears that I spoke about earlier, but also to create community in schools. So I've had a lot of experience hands-on on the ground. I've also been a mentor in the ABC program with college students, taking the kids to college students from high school. This school regionalization, the scores are down. We know the scores are down. They are down across the country. There has been an impact from COVID. And what we need to do is support our teachers and our school systems as they develop the plan for how to go forward. It is not something for the state to come in and mandate how they're going to do it, but rather support them as they do the work to help the children get better. We do not want to put additional stress on the kids. I also wanted to say, Brendan Sharkey is no longer in the state legislature, and he is not going to determine whether there is regionalization. Regionalization is not on the table.
All right, anything further, Ms. Boucher?
I'd like to say a word about teachers. This is a little known fact. I was a high school language teacher for a couple of years before business attracted me and paid me double the salary. That happens quite a bit. I often talk to groups of teachers, and I say to them, you know, politicians like to say, oh, they're running to make a difference. Well, honestly, there's only two places where you really make a true difference in society. It is in the home, and it's in the classroom. And when a home fails a child, there's only one place left, and that is in your classroom. We need to address recruiting and retaining excellent educators. We need stronger teacher preparation programs that include more classroom time before graduation from a teacher's program. We need to address entries such as loan forgiveness and easy transfer of licenses and pensions. We need to give them more support from an administrative level. I have a whole list of things that we should be doing to really attract the best and brightest to the teaching profession, and once there, keep them there.
Okay, thank you. Anything further on this, Ms. Moore? All right, thank you both. The next question goes to Ms. Moore first. What, if anything, is the role of the state legislature in establishing a balance between parents' individual concerns and the decisions of the town's elected boards of education?
I'm sorry, do you mind asking, but closer, because I'm just
I'll try again.
Garbled.
All right. What, if anything, is the role of the state legislature in establishing a balance between parents' individual concerns and the decisions of the town's elected boards of education?
I believe the question you're asking is, does the state have a position to get in between the parents and the town board of ed? Is that the question?
I can only give you the question as it was submitted.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I will ask you to read it again.
All right. What, if anything, is the role of the state legislature in establishing a balance between parents' individual concerns and the decision of the town's elected boards of education?
So perhaps this has something to do, and I don't know, it may have something to do with mandating what the Board of Eds are supposed to do. And the reason I say I don't know is because we had a similar question last night in Reading. And the question was about DEI and whether or not there was a role for the state to come in and mandate diversity, equity, and inclusion in the school board. And that is why towns elect their school boards. That's why parents get involved in their schools. That is why parents volunteer in the classroom. And that is why we have such active PTAs. Then the people who are active at that level tend to rise up into the school board because they see the ways that they can make a difference. Those are the people who are on the ground. It is not the place for the state to then come in and tell the town what they should be doing. Clearly, there are some things that the State Board of Education does, which is, for example, suggesting that there should be some form of diversity. I believe it was African American Studies a couple of years ago. That is a guideline. That is not told exactly what they're going to teach. It's a guideline. And then it is left up to the local school boards to make that decision as to what they are going to teach. So I very much believe in people being able to make the decisions for themselves. And I also believe that local input in this way in the schools is important. I know that in Westport particularly, you have the ability as a parent to opt out of having your children learn things in the health classes. You can make those decisions. And so for that reason, I think that that's a very good way of managing the situation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Boucher, same question.
You know, having served in so many multiple capacities, first on the Board of Education, and I didn't even know what the Board of Education did when they asked me to run for that seat. I just happened to be a parent that came to a public hearing and got up and spoke. And at 10 o'clock that night, somebody was calling me and saying, we need to run you for the Board of Ed. And I said, well, what does it do? And I wasn't affiliated with any political party either. So it was an interesting learning experience for me. I also learned that is an appropriate role for people's advocacy, parents' advocacy, to go through the Board of Education members, to have their opinions heard and to advocate through them. And the Board of Education's role is to allow and choose a superintendent and let them manage the school system. So there's sort of a hierarchy. On the State Board of Education, it was quite an honor, but I also learned the State Board of Education is part of the executive branch, and they do not write laws, change what is being done in schools. They implement the law, just like a governor can propose, but only the legislature can actually decide and make the laws. That's how they attracted me to run for state rep. They said, oh, you've been talking about bilingual education, Tony. You have to be on the education committee to actually change that law, to change and make it effective and happen. So on all those multiple roles, I really still feel that the local boards are in the best position to be closest to the people they represent and the parents. Parents do want some say, yes, but and of transparency, like putting curriculum online, having parents look at it, be able to see what's going on, would be a valuable direction to go in and maybe reduce some of the tension that seems to be happening across the board. There's no question that people are concerned about age appropriateness of some health curriculum that's being taught, but again, you go through your local board, an orderly process, a civil process, a respectful one. So I tend to certainly be biased towards local control and local boards of education.
Okay, thank you both. Ms. Marr, do you want to say anything further on this? Okay, Ms. Boucher, do you want to say anything further on this? Okay, thank you both. Next question goes to Ms. Boucher first. It's on transportation. How should the state address the serious traffic issues on the major highways and the resulting increase on local state roads, such as Route 1? What specifically do you propose?
When I first ran for state rep, it seemed like every issue was about transportation. They were trying to build a superhighway on Route 7. They were wanting to shut down our trains altogether on the branch line. It felt I was being thrown into these massive battles, one after another. And I became a very vocal advocate for our train system. There is no question that we're congested. Part of the issue is there are now federal rules and guidelines that would never have built 95 the way it is today. It has to have a certain level of incline and couldn't have the curves that it does, which causes these traffic jams. As well, it's constrained. It is not wide enough. What has been done is we've added an exit 8 and 14. We've widened it to try to speed up the traffic to some degree. But the kind of cost to really change our traffic patterns on a 95 or Mare Parkway is something that the federal government would have to weigh in on, as well as really massively change our train system to make it go faster. You need to take out some of the curves. You need different tracks. We also need capacity at Grand Central. They literally cannot take sometimes more capacity than they already have. So, you know, and one of the things that is a constraint as well is the fact that its overhead costs at the Department of Transportation is so high, just as it is for all the departments. A lot of the money that we send them through our gas taxes and other taxes gets eaten up by overhead and administrative costs, some of the highest in the country. So we need to reduce administrative costs that are 6 to 7 times greater than the national average. We need to speed up our trains. We need to probably continue to widen the lanes on 95 and 84. And you know, take a look at more advanced alternative fuel vehicles, and we need to modernize the electric grill and cell service as well, because that's all part of the transportation issues as well. When it comes to—
Thank you.
We'll talk more about Post Road later.
Your time has run out on this one, although there will be rebuttal later. Same question, Ms. Moore.
Okay, thank you. So there's no question that we have to address our transportation. Our trains are slower than they were when I was commuting and my dad was commuting. So we absolutely have to do something about that, and that is being done. We have a lot of money coming down from the federal government in the infrastructure bill, and we just made an announcement last week over at the train in Westport, at the train station in Westport, that there is a plan in place to speed up the trains finally and get them, put all of the investment that's coming down from the federal government and get the trains going faster. Now, it's going to take a couple of years. There are bridges that have to be fixed. There's rails that have to be fixed. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. And when I was at the train station this morning talking to voters, one of them, people said to me, well, does that mean I'm going to have to take a bus if they're fixing the bridge? And maybe they will, but sometimes we all have to do things like that in order to make it work better, because we have not put the energy and wrong use of the word. We have not put the funds into fixing our trains and our transportation for a very long time. Certainly, it didn't happen when my opponent was up there in Hartford. So now what we need to do is look at also putting in place smart stoplights so that we do not have people idling, releasing admissions when there is no traffic coming. They use smart stoplights in the Midwest all the time. And what it does is reads the traffic as it's coming through. And so that allows the traffic to flow at a better pace and doesn't keep people sitting at stoplights. And we certainly could use that over here as we go through the center of Westport.
Okay. Ms. Boucher, do you want to extend your remarks?
Just very briefly, our state has been controlled in the legislature. Remember, I just said the governors can propose, but the only places where decisions and laws get changed and budget gets passed is in the legislature. And that has been governed by one party, often by a supermajority, for most of the last 50 years. There might have been a glip 1 year or two, but in that event, the driver to transportation investment has been squarely on one side of the political aisle. Oftentimes, funds from the transportation area were actually diverted to fill gaps in the state budget. Billions of dollars of shortfalls and deficits really plagued the state for quite a long while. That being said, we do need traffic mitigation on the post road in Westport. It's dangerous. People have died. We need the state to come down, and we need to really look at it to see how they can make it safer and get traffic to not speed at the degree that they do. It's dangerous to try to cross it.
Thank you. Anything further? Ms. Moore.
Just one more thing. In Stamford, between exit 7 and exit 9, and if anyone ever has gone down there during rush hour, you know how bad it is. They're just putting in place a study to figure out how they are going to fix that. There have been over 746 accidents in that area just in 1 year. So there are plans afoot. They are taking place. And that is just a continuation of the work that the governor has done that has really been effective here in Connecticut.
All right, thank you. The next question is going to go to Ms. Moore first. What is your position on state statute 830G, which favors developers in court on local zoning questions unless the municipality being attacked has 10% of its housing defined as affordable? Should the law be maintained, modified, or repealed?
Thanks for that. It's such a big question this election season. First off, I just want to do a major shout out to Westport because you have inclusionary zoning, and that's 20% of the building has to be affordable. And so congratulations for planning that way. And Darien also has inclusionary zoning at 14%. 830G has not worked. We know that it hasn't worked fully. It has worked some. We do have 8,500 more affordable units around the state than we would have. However, we need 85,000. There is only 1.5% vacancy rate in our Fairfield County, and 2.5% vacancy rate in the state of Connecticut. There is not enough. We are growing the economy here in Connecticut. ASML has just put in 1,000 more, they're putting in 200 million into their infrastructure, and they're going to hire 1,000 more people. We have no place for people to live, and that is really important. People like myself who wants to downsize, and where am I going to go? I can't sell my house, because if I do, where am I going to go? Students who want to come back from college and live in the towns that they love, where are they going to go? So is it a great law? No, it hasn't been as effective as we would have liked it to be. Can we just get rid of it? Absolutely not. We have 30 years of planning and zoning decisions that have been made because of that statute. So what we need to do is look at how can we amend it and make it work better for the towns in Connecticut.
All right, same question, Ms. Boucher.
Well, as a former member of the housing committees, we held hearing after hearing on 8-30G and submitted dozens of bills to reform and testified on it. We wrote and spoke on behalf of it. In addition, as co-chair of transportation, we defeated efforts by the then governor's office to take areas over around train stations and also transit for private purposes and attempts to override planning and zoning. It is true that towns already have affordable housing stock, but they're not allowed to count them in the 10% minimum from exclusion on the 8-G mandates. It should, by the way, be replaced or reformed. Unfortunately, any attempt to modify the statute was voted down by the majority that put it in place in the first place. This year, they wanted to extend it even further. They had proposals that would control housing around a 20 or a half a mile around a train station, which could be devastating to the 2 train stations here in Westport. They also proposed oversight over local housing authorities by having the cities control the suburb housing authorities and also take over a lot of the decision-making that our local planning and zonings do. They were able to get these bills through committee, but pause their efforts because it's an election year. And too many residents want their state out of their housing decisions. But there is deep concern that it will come back. They're concerned because this is a priority, especially for our inner city representatives. We should never forget that for most people, the purchase of a home is their most significant financial investment over the course of their life, and that we want to protect the historic character in colonial villages that attract so many people here. In fact, a lot of folks that came from New York were trying to get away from this very dense housing, and they don't want to see more of them.
Do you wish to say anything further on this, Ms. Moore?
I do.
Yep.
Thank you. There's so much that was just being said. The legislature works together. I don't think they're nefarious, and they didn't pull the transit-oriented development bill because they were in an election year. So I don't think that that's giving the voters a very good view of the way the legislature works, and you were there for 22 years. And talking about inner city reps wanting the 830G more than anything else, more than anyone else, I don't know, that's kind of a dog whistle, Tony. Oh, it's the truth, okay.
All right, Ms. Boucher, do you wish to rebut?
Thank you. I was there when I had one member propose 32 amendments. He was a representative from Trumbull, and they were just being overwhelmed. They couldn't absorb the massive numbers of 8-30G developments that occurred. And many of our local communities can't absorb the increase in student population from these high-density housing complex, and traffic can become intolerable. Westport is a very good example of the many problems they've discussed and talked about. I think we should take a more honest approach to affordable housing by including existing properties that meet income-based affordability standards and eliminate the requirement for deed restrictions for owner-occupied affordable housing, which restricts the ability to create home equity. We should also remove any existing state-imposed barriers to voluntary regional shared services, which many towns are already doing without the state forcing them to do it.
All right, thank you both. Next question goes to Ms. Boucher first. What should Connecticut do, if anything, to aid large and small businesses in creating more jobs?
Oh, this is a question that touches me directly. I've worked in large corporations, but had small businesses. My husband and I have had them in Wilton and in Norwalk. We know exactly how state mandates and additional costs affects a business's livelihood. There's no question. Our payroll costs in Connecticut are 25% more than any other state. Even our neighboring states. I've had a few people tell me that they moved their business services to Pennsylvania even, because their payroll costs were less. There's so much to talk about. It's just not the income tax, which small businesses, that's part of what a big corporation would have as corporate taxes. And by the way, Connecticut punishes corporations by putting, it used to be a 20% profit tax. Now they made it 10%, but they never took it away. It was supposed to be temporary. But in addition to that, high energy costs, high real estate costs, rents, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, they're always higher here. And they always make the employer foot most of the bill, where other states do carry some of the load for them. I would just mention the restaurant tax. Not only do they have a 6.35 tax on their food, the state added another 1% during the worst time in the downturn, where 30% of those restaurants are shutting down. Okay, we need to be more positive, relieve some of those mandates. Now, some of them are good. You know, the Medical Leave Act that we have, but it's twice as expensive and twice as expansive as California. We have healthcare costs on the employer, all good to have, but we routinely, when I was in the Senate, there was one representative or state senator that added 20 mandates every single year. And I said, do you know what the cumulative of that is? Yes, we should have diabetes medicine. We should have diabetes equipment. But then we had to do certain training sessions, and then there were more things that appeared. I said, what is the cumulative cost of that over time?
Okay, thank you. Same question, Ms. Moore.
Do you mind reading it again?
All right.
There was so much there that I've already lost the question.
What should Connecticut do, if anything, to aid large and small businesses in creating more jobs?
Okay, thank you. Well, I've run a lot of small businesses because when you're running a nonprofit, you're running a small business. You have to think about all the costs inherent in the small business. And I remember when I was running Sandy Hook Promise, and the family medical leave, paid family and medical leave bills became due. I'm not saying that right, I apologize. When it came into play, and we had to sit down with all of our employees, and there were 80 employees at Sandy Hook at that time across the country, and we had to talk to them about this, this bill. And the fact that we were going to add it into the cost of their costs. And honestly, everyone was really very happy about it, because what it meant was on the other side of the year, once we had built up a fund, that people were going to be able to start using these, to access this leave, to take care of a sick family member, to be sick themselves, it was really, really important. And this has been an incredibly positive thing that we have had in Connecticut. And a lot of people have used it, and it has been really wonderful for the people who have used it. So I tend to see the world in a much better light than my opponent. I see the possibilities, and I see the ways in which we can make things happen for people. And that's what I want to do up in Hartford. And I know that the Secretary of State they're planning on making small businesses, the access to small businesses, which by the way are growing. Sorry.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Boucher, do you want to say? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I think I want to address what we can do. I think some of the things we can do is reduce the income tax from 5% to 4% for families and businesses making less than $175,000 a year. Many businesses do not, I know our business often didn't make that kind of money in a year. Sometimes it would just be $50,000 in that 1 year. They can repeal the highway use tax and diesel fuel on trucks that are starting in 2023. And a new tax, in addition, that was passed in 2021. They can increase the property tax credit that can be claimed for real estate and motor vehicles. And also not propose additional taxes or a statewide commercial property tax and or more taxes, as was proposed this last session, on digital advertising when they already have a new tax on laundry, veterinary services, your beautician. I don't think there's anything that they've left that they're not taxing at the moment.
All right, do you want to say anything further, Ms. Moore?
Really quick. Tony brings up the diesel tax all the time. Yes, the diesel tax did go up this year, but that diesel tax was a negotiated tax that was put in place years ago. Was the timing unfortunate that it went up? Yes, but that was the decision that was made by both parties. And Tony brings it up as though this is something new and she doesn't understand why all of a sudden it happened and that it was done out of the blue. That is not the case. It was a negotiated, graduated tax that was decided upon by both parties. I just want to make that clear.
All right, at this point, we don't have time for another full round of questions, so this is going to be the yes/nos. Grab your cards. You both get to do them at the same time. Okay, the first question is on tolls. Yes or no, do you support tolls on I-95? All right, next question. Do you support Connecticut remaining a safe harbor for women seeking abortions? And the last shorty, do you support establishing Connecticut as a sanctuary state for immigrants?
That's a tough one. That is not a yes or no.
All right, both candidates have just told me that's not a valid question. Thank you.
There's so much more to that.
Okay, I'm willing to abide by majority decision here. At this point, we get to the closing statements. By luck of the draw, I'm going to say that this one is going to go to Ms. Moore first. Closing 2 minutes, no rebuttals.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for watching online, and thanks to the League for doing this, because I know that we're at the end of the election season and you're great to have made it happen. On November 8th, voters in the 26th Senate District will be able to choose between two very different records and two different visions for the future. We have now had 7 debates, and in those 7 debates, I have consistently heard the negativity about how bad Connecticut is, how Connecticut is falling apart, we're overtaxed, we have no future. It's really quite stunning to me because I know all the good things that are happening. I know all the people who have come, 50,000 people who have come to Connecticut, because they now know that this is a remarkable place to live. And our governor has done a fantastic job. He did in COVID, and he also has done things like put in place the Office of Workforce Strategy. He has put in place the advanced CT, where we actually are going out and asking other businesses to come here. We have a growth in financial technology in Stanford, in biotech in New Haven. We have advanced manufacturing. Nothing that flies over 10 feet, whether it's a drone or a helicopter, nothing that goes over that goes without a part that was built in Connecticut. Electric boat is thriving, ASML is thriving. We have so much to be thankful for here in Connecticut. And so when you go to the polls next week on Tuesday, and I hope everybody goes, You need to look at what you want for Connecticut. Do you want this doom and gloom, or do you want someone who believes we can do more?
Thank you. Closing statement, Ms. Boucher.
I've been a corporate executive and a small business owner. I was proud to serve Westport as the top leader in the state Senate. I also served as minority leader in the House, Board of Education chair, selectman, and on the State Board of Education. I know how state mandates impact our businesses and residents. I wasn't planning to run again, but we're now facing serious issues. Divisiveness and partisanship has intensified. For the record, I don't believe the 2020 presidential election was stolen, and I'm appalled by the events on January 6th. I believe in the peaceful transfer of power and the electoral process. It's time to restore trust in government. No matter who tries to convince you otherwise, I've done the hard work of negotiating and voting for women's right to choose, gay marriage, gun control, and budgets that created the current budget surplus. It took weeks, even months, to achieve compromise on so many contentious issues. Working across party lines, finding compromise are the best way to achieve our mutual goals. That is how I was able to pass the Holocaust education mandate, help to save Wakeman's Farm, Partridge Neighborhood, restore the Levitt Pavilion and Westport Playhouse, and created the NRVT Greenway in place of a superhighway. People ask me, why am I not a Democrat given my liberal social policies? Fiercely independent, I was the only Republican to vote for the global warming bill and the public financing of campaigns. Even the Connecticut Independent Party has placed me on their line with mostly Democrats. But Hartford is constantly passing higher taxes and anti-business mandates, and that is why. Bills are pushed out of committee to regionalize our schools, expand 8-30G, bring back tolls, a statewide property tax, raise the diesel tax, which raises food prices. Hartford also passed the most anti-police bill in the United States. If elected, I will focus on reducing Connecticut's high cost energy prices, defend Westport from regionalization, reform 8-30G, protect a woman's right to choose, and support law enforcement. I will work as a true social moderate and fiscal conservative with civility and respect for all sides.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you
10-minute
both.
break.
We're going to have a change now of our candidates, where we're going to have the assembly candidates coming up. I want to direct your attention. We have a blow up of the ballot that you're all going to be looking at next week. Over on the right-hand side in bright yellow is vote yes. We very much want you to vote yes so that we can finally increase the number of days for voting in the state of Connecticut. We know that when it's easier to vote, when you have more opportunity to vote, the percentage of voters goes up, and we want everyone to vote. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, got everything? Okay, thank you. Do you still have the numbers 1 and 2 for the draw?
I do not have numbers 1 and 2.
All right, so we've got 3 and 4. Let me see if I can find another couple of pieces of paper. Okay.
Seating assignments in mind? You've got
Tradition, little pieces of paper. And what I'd like to do, though, in terms of the seating, no matter who's got first, second, third, or fourth, I would like to have the candidates for 136 on one side, and the candidates, okay, and the 143rd on the other. It doesn't matter which is which, as long as people can see who's running against who.
They have the signs up, so that's very
Okay, that helps. All right, that works.
They anticipate your every need.
No, one of the reasons I'm willing to moderate in this town is that they do run a very good debate. All right. I have got to say that this compares very favorably with my own league, which is Bridgeport area, where we had one candidate.
Listen, before you leave, please consider taking a vote sign. We've got the lawn signs for you, and I've got more in my car. Jonathan, would you come up? Alma? Alma, okay. Jonathan, you're first. Alma second. And Dominique. Where is Dominique? Okay. All right, we'll get started as soon as she's in place, all right?
You want
Thank
to
you.
give these candidates, it's not, the answers are not necessarily going to be exactly in the order of draw. Well, I will explain that. Okay. Everybody picks. Please tell me who gets first, second, third, and fourth.
Just pick one. Oops. Okay. Okay, you're one.
I can't read this at all.
That's three.
You say so.
All right. Oh, that works out nicely because they'll be answering by district. All right. All right. Okay, you've got about 5 minutes. Are there any questions about the format? All right. What I'm going to do, though, is if Ms. Hampton goes first, Ms. Johnson is going to go second. If Ms. Johnson goes second, Ms. Hampton will go and answer her, and then we'll go down the line. So that whenever we have a question to a candidate, his or her opponent will be the next person to answer, and then we'll work our way down the table. Okay? In the order of draw. So Hampton, Johnson, Steinberg, Sorelli. Okay, that's not the order of seating, but that's the way the questions are going to go. I will try. Okay, but this will give the audience a chance to see what the answers are in the 136th versus the answers in the 143rd. Okay, all right.
Are we going to be alternating districts?
Yes, well, by luck of the draw, the first two questions are going to go to the 136th first. The next two questions will go to the 143rd first. Well, that's the order. I'm sorry, you're quite right.
Just want to make sure.
You're right. Okay, you were quite right. So, all right, so Ms. Hampton is,
Switch the order of seating for this? Would that be helpful?
that would be extremely helpful because you're supposed to be seated by district. Yeah, this is, yeah. All right. Are we right?
With 143rd right here, yeah.
Okay. So the 143rd is, that's interesting. All right, so the 130, all right, I'm sorry. So the 136 is Steinberg and Sorelli, and the 143rd is Johnson and Hampton. Is that correct? All right. This is what I get for being out of town. Well, that's the reason they hire me. All right, I don't have any candidates in this race.
You're still having problems being heard.
All right, I will try to be right on top of the mic for this. Are we
Or
about-
if we don't want to answer, we're just going to say, I can't understand you.
Yeah,
At least for
absolutely.
me, English is my second language, so I can get away with that.
Yeah,
Please speak into the mic.
yeah. All right, are we ready?
Yes.
All right, I am going to assume if the camera people tell me we're ready, yes, The questions are going to go in the order of draw roughly. The first question starts with Ms. Hampton, and it is, what aspect of your background and experience qualifies you to serve in the Connecticut legislature?
Thanks for the question. So I'm not a politician, right? I'm a mama bear who's upset with what's going on in our community as far as education and public safety. And I also serve on different councils and advisory boards. I'm on the local prevention council, which we work very well with the different mental health and addiction providers within our area. And I also sit on a couple of boards and advisory committees for DMIS, which is the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And I'm a strong advocate for anything from IEPs for children all the way to different services for, the disabled. And especially my strong point is behavioral health when it comes to mental health and addiction.
All right, same question, Ms. Johnson.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters here in Westport Library for having us, and for everyone here and everyone watching at home. It's such an important part of our democracy to have these conversations. I currently serve on Norwalk's Common Council, and this is my second term. I'm very proud to serve everyone in the city of Norwalk. Before I joined my council, I was a community leader and advocate working with nonprofits, being on the boards of nonprofits, and as always, I am an educator at heart. I come from a family of educators, in fact, 3 generations, and so the well-being of our young people has always been at the center of everything I've done. I think this is a unique qualification that I have. It's driven me to achieve in my own lives, to follow the dreams of my grandmother to get my own education. I went to Stanford for my master's degree and Temple for my PhD in education. I'm a former college professor and a nonprofit consultant, and I think working with people and making people my purpose makes me uniquely qualified in this race to represent everybody, Republicans, Independents, Unaffiliated, and Democrats in the 143rd District. There are a lot of issues facing our district, but I think making a Connecticut that works for everyone is going to be a huge focus for me. And I think that what that means is our education system, strengthening it, working on jobs so we can fill those, that we're having a workforce crisis with 100,000 jobs that are unfilled, and making sure that we work to connect people with jobs. And lastly, protecting our freedoms. Particularly reproductive freedom. These are the things I've been talking about with folks in Westport on the doors for the past 5, 6, 7 months. And it's something that I know people are concerned about the future for their children and for the next generations. The contributions I've made on the council involve climate change, education, and making sure we have civil rights protections, and that's something that I want to definitely bring to us, for us here in Westport and Hartford. Those are Westport values. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. I have 12 years' experience in the legislature in leadership roles. I chair the Public Health Committee that has been involved with helping the administration navigate through the pandemic, passing the Tobacco 21 legislation, protecting our kids from vaping, and assuring access to reproductive rights and reproductive services. Before that, I spent 7 years on the RTM, 3 times unanimously elected deputy moderator. And I've also been the nominal leader of House Democrat moderates, and it was our involvement in the 2017 budget that led to a bipartisan budget and the budget controls that have put our state in the firm physical condition that it is today, with a full rainy day fund and over $450 million in savings from paying down our pension debt. Before that, I spent 25 years in the business community, working for Fortune 100 companies like Revlon and Bristol-Myers. I also worked for small companies. I understand manufacturing, I understand how to manage big businesses, and I understand small businesses. I also worked for services companies like Mount Sinai Hospital and the Jewish Life Care System, where I was senior vice president. So I bring a business perspective as well as many years in the legislature. Lastly, I'm a Westporter. I grew up here. I love this town. I came back here with my kids so they could benefit from the great educational system we have and all the amenities that we offer. I listen to Westporters all the time. I go to meetings. I talk to people privately. I've been able to bring their ideas, their concerns to Hartford and advocate on their behalf. Sometimes all we do is protect Westporters from things that aren't good in Hartford. I have fought bad legislation, like some of the things they wanted to do with 830G. I'm looking to replace it with something better. So you have an experienced legislator here who is prepared to do what's necessary and tackle the tough problems Connecticut yet faces. Thank you.
Right. Ms. Sorelli.
Well, thank you for hosting us tonight, and thank you, library, and thank you to all of you. What makes me qualify to run for state rep is I am a business owner. My husband and I, we have a business. I've been working for over 15 years in business. I graduated in business management. I would love to have a chance to run for state rep because I love this town. I moved in Westport over 7 years ago. I see the issues, some of the issues that haven't been tackled. I see the issues that we have in our schools districts. I love this town. I'll do the best I can to put my energy and my experience to run our town better. Lower our taxes that we have in Westport and the state of Connecticut. I'll do the best I can to make a difference for Westport and the state of Connecticut. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to extend? Yes, all right.
I just want to add that beyond my experience, I also have the formal training and experience as well. I have a bachelor's from Yale, and I got my MBA from the Stern School of Business at NYU. And I'm also certified to teach in the public schools, having gone through the state's alternate route certification to teach. I find all that formal training also extremely valuable in working in Hartford, particularly when it comes to negotiating and finding common ground to find effective compromises. That's how things get done in Hartford. It's a combination of experience and education.
Yes.
Yeah, so, I might not have a PhD in education, but I do have a PhD in common sense, which I know most of you guys do as well. And I listen to my opponent talk about climate change while they're dumping raw sewage in the Sound in Norwalk. Or, when she hires a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer 2 weeks before the election to try to, pawn off the black community, that's hurting the black and brown community. DEI does nothing but divide good people, right? And then I sit here and I heard Representative Steinberg talk about all the great things he does for Westport, but he heads up the Public Health Committee that passed the marijuana bill, and now they're opening storefronts in Norwalk. So is that good for your children?
Anything further? Yes.
Thank you very much. My opponent is talking about sewage. Just to be brief, this has already been addressed by the city of Norwalk, and I believe this is the third time that we've been discussing this. It really reveals a lack of understanding about how our municipal government works. We have an authority which is separate from the council. We have a legislative body, a council, an executive, a mayor, and this authority is separate from that, and they're working with DEEP to resolve that issue. I grew up in a common sense, work hard, give back values family. My PhD is hard fought and earned. I took out loans to get it. I understand what it means to work hard, and I understand what it means to get where you are because of common sense. What I'll tell you right now is that our children in Westport, you just today were ranked the #1 school district in the entire state of Connecticut, number 17 in the country. That is something I know you're so proud of. And as an educator, I value that so much, and I want to be a part of making sure that you continue to have the school system that is renowned throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Sorelli? All right, thank you. Next question goes to Ms. Johnson first. What increased mass transit options, if any, do you support, and what funding measures will be required?
Thank you for the question. I do also want to briefly address, because I find it egregious, my opponent discussing DEI and the way in which she did. The whole point of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to make sure that we see each other as neighbors, that we see each other as people worthy of each other's respect and dignity. And in hiring a diversity and inclusion officer in Norwalk, that's a step in the right direction. It's one I'm proud of, and it's one that I supported because it was an idea of my council member colleagues. And as chair of the Community Services Committee, I absolutely support all of my colleagues in this effort for us to create a more welcoming, diverse, accepting of diversity city and region. I know Westport, you value this as well. With regard to transportation, we need a 21st century transportation system that is green. We need a 21st century transportation system that allows folks to walk and bike if they so choose safely, and allows us to also invest in our infrastructure. And this infrastructure is a gift that we give to our children. And has been mentioned in the previous debate, it's something that really did not get the investment it deserved. And now with this influx of federal funds, we're going to see even more investment. The ARPA funds have done this, and now the bipartisan infrastructure bill is going to continue this work. What this means for Westport and Norwalk is to make sure that we have some high-speed rail options, to make sure that we have Metro North trains that are running more swiftly. It's been mentioned, they're slower every year. We also need to make sure that we have traffic calming measures on the Post Road and elsewhere, so that we know that if we want to walk somewhere, we'll be safe. Our children also deserve safe routes to school if they so choose to walk as well. So that means investing in the infrastructure, in our sidewalks, in making sure that we have bike lanes. I also really think we should work on our intercity bike lanes, and I think intercity bike paths, and I think there's a real opportunity there between Newark and Westport to make sure we can make this happen for our 21st century green transportation. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Hampton, same question?
Yes, thank you. And as far as the DEI officer, my opponent has hired a BLM activist / rapper from San Jose, and Black Lives Matter does not do anything for the Black community, okay? And all lives matter, for that fact. But back to the question about transportation, I think here in Westport, we definitely need to review the traffic reports that our first select woman has already been working on with the police department as far as how to reduce the traffic at all the major intersections in Westport. And we need to review those and implement them, you know, and help them get the funding that they need to do so. And another thing, we were at the train station the other day in Westport, and a commuter had mentioned that ever since COVID, was it the 713 train? One of the 7 o'clock trains has less stops, but takes the same amount of time to get to Grand Central. So he wanted to know how we could fix that when we get up to Hartford. I'm like, we'll find out. But there's a lot of work to be done, and it can definitely be done.
All right, same question, Ms. Sorelli?
As we all know, traffic in Westport is pretty bad, and transportation, my opponent has been for over 12 years. Nothing has done upon it. People always complaining, traffic, transportation, trains are always late. As Nicole had mentioned, yes, I've been there at the train station in the morning, and people always complaining why we're having these issues, why these issues, the transportation hasn't been tackled. And I said, I am running for this. If I get a chance to get elected, I'll do the best I can to make sure we tackle this issue. And since 2018, there hasn't been a lot of diversion from the Special Transportation Fund. On the other hand, before 2018, the Malloy administration used to divert stuff from there all the time. With the surplus that we have now, we should repay the fund and all money that was diverted, all hundreds of millions of dollars, before we talk about any new revenue for transportation. I think all the money that we have now, and the taxes we all collect, we can fix the transportation, and hopefully we can tackle this issue. It's a lot to be done, but it's not impossible.
Mr. Steinberg, same question.
Let me start by correcting Ms. Hampton. The marijuana bill never came to the Public Health Committee, even though I protested that effect. I did help negotiate that some of the tax revenues would be used for education and addiction services, up to $20 million a year. So I wish she'd get her facts straight on that. As far as transportation goes, infrastructure investment is our #1 priority as a state. We all know that our railroads are not running as fast as they used to. When I used to commute in the city, it was 55 minutes. Now it's an hour and 20 minutes. It's because of those ancient 120-year railroad bridges. When I chaired the Transportation Bonding Subcommittee, we secured over $5 billion that have been used to help match federal funds. The Walk Bridge in Norwalk, the first of those bridges, is being worked on right now. The Sauk Bridge in Westport is next. We need to get our infrastructure system together. The rail plan that we've just gotten from DOT is a great first step, but we need to integrate it with all our multimodal systems, including buses. Mass transit is our future. We've got to replace roads and bridges as well. But I'll tell you, as Ms. Boucher said, widening lanes and widening ramps makes no impact on traffic. The real answer is congestion pricing tolls, but the Republicans killed that, and we still have the problems with funding infrastructure because of that. Thankfully, we have federal infrastructure funds right now that are going towards that. I want to prioritize those funds, make sure that we stop raiding the Special Transportation Fund, which frankly the Republicans are the ones who want to do now by extending the gas tax holiday indefinitely. We need that money to match to get the federal dollars to deal with our critical transportation infrastructure. Traffic in Westport, I love the idea of smart lights and traffic calming measures. Many other communities are using them. We must deal with traffic. We're going to remain an inviting community.
All right, does anyone wish to rebut or extend? Oh boy, let me just go down the row.
Thank you very much. I must say, again, my opponent does not reveal an understanding of how our government works. The mayor hired our diversity inclusion officer. The council literally had no role in hiring this officer. We just discussed this in a committee meeting. We did not hire the officer. It's a mayoral hire. Again, no understanding of how our government works. I must also say, my opponent is detached from reality. In April 2022, she tweeted out, and it's publicly available on a local news site in Norwalk, that the insurrection did not happen. She said there was no insurrection. This is a candidate for state representative for our community that is detached from reality. This is not what you deserve. You deserve a common sense thinker who's pragmatic and will work with people of all parties on your behalf and listen to you with an open heart. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next.
Yeah, so I do understand how government works, and you can read in Nancy on Norwalk article a couple days ago where it talks about how the council voted and hired the DEI officer. Okay, so I completely understand, and our local media supports my answer. And back to the marijuana thing, and our marijuana bill protecting our kids, there is no money for prevention until fiscal year 3. So I do know that law too, and I'm a very strong advocate for mental health and addiction. And I just want to clarify that.
All right.
And what Jonathan is keeps saying this, Republicans prevent this. Democrats had majority for over 30 years. You could pass any bill you want. You can't put a blame on Republicans. Even you taking credit for the budget. There were only 4 Democrats that were with the Republican Party, and that's why we have the surplus in 2017. So I am not sure why everything you can do or pass, you are able to do because you hold the majority. So I'm not sure why you keep saying this. Republicans prevent here, Republicans prevent here. You've been 12 years part of the Committee of Transportation. You have not tackled this issue. Oh, I have moved in Westport for 7 years. It's the #1 complaint. There's always traffic, always transportation. Well, guess what? You have not answered, you have not tackled, and I understand you keep saying Republicans, but I'm sorry, the record doesn't lie. You can see who is the majority.
If I may. Apparently my opponent wasn't listening when I talked about the $5 billion that we secured for this. I should also say that the former occupant of the 143rd District, Gail Aviel, helped engineer the change to our Council of Governments and Municipal Planning Organization to go north-south rather than east-west. The real action in Connecticut is along the shoreline, and that's why our trains and highways are so critical. If we don't really deal with that, we will cease to be the gateway to New England, and we will find it very difficult for us to compete with surrounding states. I've worked very hard at this. Some of my Democrat colleagues, frankly, were chicken on tolls because they're afraid it would hurt them with the voters. The bottom line is, if we don't do congestion pricing, the traffic problems we have on I-95 will not get better.
All right, thank you. That was rebuttal on all of this. We are timed out on this question. All right. Next question will go to Mr. Steinberg first. How will you promote the growth of new businesses in Connecticut?
I've been involved with a number of caucuses that have been very involved, the Advanced Manufacturing Caucus, the Tourism Caucus. I'm co-chair of the Bioscience Caucus. Life sciences are a great growth opportunity here in the state. More importantly, I've been intimately involved with programs like the STEP program that help businesses find loans and grants so that they can expand and improve their equipment, and also working with the local community schools and vocational programs to create certification programs and apprenticeships that help young people get the training they need for the jobs that are available. Most people don't realize we have a lot of manufacturing here in the state of Connecticut, advanced manufacturing. It's not just Sikorsky and Electric Boat. It's a lot of small companies that make precision components for a lot of businesses. We are trying to create a pathway to make sure that young people have a chance to get those jobs, just like we're doing in the life sciences, trying to get more nurses and more social workers to deal with the burgeoning need for healthcare providers here in the state. The bill we passed last year on mental health also had a lot of recruitment and retention dollars in there to make sure that when we train healthcare providers, that we give them incentive to stay in the state through incentives, maybe some relief on their taxes or on their tuition, so that they stay here and are able to provide quality care. Access is a huge issue in the state. Those are just two areas we're talking about. There are others as well. There's a lot going on. Our effort now through the Office of Work Strategy that the governor started is to coordinate and integrate these activities so anybody looking for a good job in the state has an opportunity. Connecticut is a hot place to be going forward. We're growing jobs. We've done it for 9 straight months. We're continuing on that path.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Sorelli.
Well, I would love to say I agree with my opponent, but state of Connecticut, as you can see, they are sort of against the businesses because I see a lot of businesses are moving out of the state of Connecticut. We have such high taxes in the state of Connecticut. We have to put initiatives for small business to remain here and big business to remain here. So when our children graduate college, are able to stay here and afford to live here in the state of Connecticut. So being over 12 years as a rep as a legislator, you have not done anything because look at the business, how many they're leaving. State of Connecticut is the second state in the whole United States that has the highest taxes. So you're not doing anything to lower the taxes or removing the red tapes. I would suggest less government so for our business they can grow big and small. So less taxes, less red tape. That's what would be my suggestion.
All right, Ms. Hampton.
Yes, thank you. You know, I think we need to be inclusive, you know, when we're talking about helping small businesses, not just for Black and brown communities, for everyone, because everyone suffered throughout the pandemic, you know, and we need to reduce the taxes on business. There's so much red tape and taxes on business in this state. Our own governor's wife moved her business to Nashville because of the taxes and the red tape. So that should tell you something right there. You know, we need to lift the red tape. We need to get rid of taxes, you know, reduce income taxes for working families of the middle class, cut sales tax, you know, address the car tax, property tax credit. We're supposed to be expanding that. It never got expanded like Lamont promised. There's a lot of broken promises, and this state is ran on a one-party rule. So again, it definitely can't be blamed on the Republicans.
All right, Ms. Johnson.
Yes. I think that there's so many ways we can help support our businesses. I've been proud as a council member in Norwalk to usher through funding with ARPA to make sure we develop a workforce development initiative with our community services department. The small businesses in any community are the heart and soul of our community. I know firsthand, and I know many of you do when you work for or with a small business, that they lift communities up. And I truly believe that when we raise up women, we raise up families and we raise up entire communities. So I'm really dedicated to helping underrepresented women and all women in these small businesses. When we have small businesses, from my own experience, they help you keep your job, make your ends meet, get you health insurance, help you achieve your dreams of going to school. That's what one did for me when I worked for a small business. And we know better than any type of business, they give back to the communities they call home. And so for what I think we should look forward to are universal tax credits for small business, making sure we have entrepreneurship programs, especially for career changers, veterans, and young people. We need to make sure that we have workforce development initiatives, especially for women who stopped out of jobs during the pandemic and who are having what's the She Session, right? 7 years back into the workforce to help them get an on-ramp back into the workforce. You know, Connecticut's on pace, a record pace for business startups this year. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. I see it in the district. We can have an incredible innovation corridor here in Norwalk and Westport with the new Business Development Center opening up in Norwalk tomorrow. And I think we need to make it easier for small businesses to access affordable health care options for their employees, to make sure that we give them the tools they need to keep people and families happy in their communities. Helping residents struggling with student loans also is another thing small businesses do really well. It helped me that way too. We need to make sure that we can give these small businesses the tools to keep their employees happy. Thank you.
All right, does anybody wish to, yes, Mr. Steinberg.
I just want to pick up on what Dominique said. Connecticut is known as a state of innovation. We are number 5 in the country for new patents. We are really attracting venture capital, over $100 million invested in venture capital in the state in recent years, mostly in the life sciences and in tech, showing that we're a place to be. We're developing the ecosystems that are allowing for green jobs and a lot of these new healthcare jobs. And I have to come back to infrastructure, transportation, housing, broadband. How many people are working from home? We need to invest in infrastructure to encourage small business to grow. And I'll just end by saying, I read somewhere that if a meteor was about to strike the earth and wipe out everybody on the planet, the Republican answer would be lower taxes.
All right, anything further? Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with Dominique. Affordable health care is important for small businesses, and that's why the Democrats should stop adding all these mandates on. Why do you think your insurance is going up 25% this year? That's why. I think we're one of 2 or 3 states that covers wigs. We have so many mandates, and that's why, the true reason why our insurance costs are going up. And we need to stop the overdevelopment of our communities. Our infrastructure can't handle that.
And yes, go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to say that, when we talk about these businesses, we have to also remember that there are forces that be that want to roll back and weaken our paid family and medical leave. And this is absolutely important for women. So we have to fight, I think, a lot of these fights because there are people that are constantly trying to threaten the very policies that will help small businesses. I also think that we need to think about making sure that we eliminate sales tax on training programs and close gender wage and wealth gaps. I have to return to one more thing. For a fact check, the DI officer that came to the council was not voted on by the council. This is the 3rd time I've had to make this clarification. Again, how government works. I also want to say again to my opponent, now that it's public, you said there was no insurrection. I'd like to know, and I think the voters would also like to know, what do you mean by that? And do you still say that? Do you still believe that? Are you an insurrection denier?
All right, Ms. Sorelli, do you want to say anything on this question? No.
Well, then, if I understand the state of Connecticut is one of the greatest states, and I do believe that, that's why I'm living here and raising a family, why our businesses are leaving? We're not helping business by high taxes and not removing red tapes. So we need to do better, lower taxes, more initiative to the business so they can stay here and help our families. When our children graduate, they always have to look somewhere else for jobs. They don't say, I'm staying here and looking in the state of Connecticut. We have high taxes and high cost of living.
All right, that was answers and rebuttals from all 4 candidates. Thank you very much. The next question will go to Ms. Sorelli first, and it is, what additional gun and school safety laws, if any, should Connecticut enact?
May you repeat again?
Repeat the question. What additional gun and school safety laws, if any, should Connecticut enact?
Well, I support the Connecticut's laws that we have right now. State of Connecticut has one of the restricted gun laws in the United States. So I do agree with the red flag laws as well that remove guns from individuals. We need to add more officers for our schools to keep our children safe. We need to add more security cameras so we can keep our children safe. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. I remember where I was when I heard about the devastating tragedy of Sandy Hook. And I'm very proud that I was in the legislature when we passed a landmark bipartisan legislation among the strongest in the entire country to deal with that issue. I was also a strong advocate on behalf of banning bump stocks and ghost guns, for safe storage laws, for the red flag laws, and believe that we still have a ways to go. I think that we should require everybody who owns a gun to have insurance, and we should limit the number of guns that anybody can purchase at any given time. The CAGV, Connecticut Against Gun Violence, has endorsed me year after year. I've worked collaboratively with them. My committee passed a bill which recognizes gun violence as a public health crisis. Sandy Hook is one kind of problem, one kind of tragedy, but these tragedies happen every day in our inner cities. There are simply too many guns, and we certainly don't need assault rifles. I really hope that not only do we combat the ridiculous lawsuits to overturn our assault weapons ban, but that we actually expand them and make them illegal to own here in the state of Connecticut.
All right. Same question, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much. This question is very dear to me as not only an educator, but somebody who's spent over 10 years thinking about these issues as a school climate and safety researcher. I've thought about what it means for students to go to school who don't feel safe in their own school, who don't feel celebrated for being who they are. And this has been something that I have spent a good deal of my professional life trying to improve by creating research that can be used to create the policy that Mr. Steinberg is talking about. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that I've received the endorsement and the support of so many teachers and education organizations in this campaign, and I'm grateful for it. There's a lot of work to do, and I think Mr. Steinberg's right. We have to make sure that we have a ban on assault and military-style weapons, because these are the weapons used in our mass school shootings. We also need to make sure that we have education in the school about safe storage at home for those families who are gun owners. I think that that's been done in California. It's something that could possibly be really successful here if we do it in a way that fits with what the landscape is here in Connecticut. I also think that we need to make sure we support our teachers. We need to support them not only with funding, but with making sure that we respect their expertise and their professional stature as true professionals who know and are based in years of experience in education. Anytime I hear attacks on our schools like what's coming from my opponent, I wonder, how can you say this about the best school system in the state? The curriculum here isn't the problem. It's people who are going to Hartford who want to legislate on education like my opponent and base it in conspiracy theory. I think that with our teachers keeping people safe in school also means that we are committed to making sure that we have character and social emotional learning so that children are given the tools to be whole selves and to be able to celebrate each other and give each other the respect they deserve as young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hampton.
All righty. So I just want to let you all know I do denounce January 6th. My comment on Twitter was based on an insurrection, which under federal law definition means that they went in guns blazing and not one person had a gun that day. So I just want to let that be known. And as far as our gun laws here in Connecticut, yes, I think we have good gun laws in effect. You know, we're one of the strongest states when it comes to gun laws. Connecticut leads the nation with the strictest gun laws. And of course, I support universal background checks, and we already have safe storage laws in Connecticut. Maybe my opponent's unaware of that, but we already have that. You know, in school, as far as school safety, we need annual audits to make sure the buildings are safe, to make sure we have enough cameras inside and out, so that we know what's going on in those schools. Because I know in Norwalk, that's not the case. You know, and another thing, SROs, that's so important. I've seen a huge difference in my daughter's school in Norwalk when it comes to SROs, when they're in the school and not in the school. Those kids are having the time of their life when those SROs weren't in school during the pandemic. They were vaping in the bathroom, selling alcohol in the bathroom. We had overdoses. It was insane. And not to mention the fights. Girls jumping girls left and right with no consequences. So it's kind of like, you know, how we let people steal cars in Connecticut with no consequences. You know, so I think there's a lot of work to be done, but the fact that my opponent can sit here with her working family's endorsement for safe schools and they call to defund the police is amazing to me.
Is it rebuttal? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. First of all, the Working Families Party is a party for people who want to be upwardly mobile. I do not support defund the police. In fact, I sit on the Public Safety Committee of my council, where I have repeatedly voted to support the requests from our public safety officers, our police department, to make sure that they have the tools they need to keep our students safe. We have school resource officers that have been hired, because that's something that's very important, I think, to me as a member of the council, and the community has spoken, and we're responsive to that. I also just, I can't fathom this dark vision of our education system that my opponent is proposing. Again, when we have some of the best schools in the nation here in Westport, this is just not, this is not based in reality. And furthermore, I'm appalled and I'm speechless at what my opponent has said about the insurrection on January 6th, especially when a police officer lost their life in the line of duty defending our democracy itself.
Time. Yo, save the applause, the boos, and the comments for afterwards, please. All right, do you wish to rebut? Yes, Mr. Steinberg, all right, and then go ahead.
I'm sure you're all aware that Westport schools were in a lockdown just a few days ago. Not just our town, but many other states. A really nefarious effort by somebody to put our kids at risk and to scare the hell out of them. I think that we need to acknowledge that a lot of our kids have become traumatized by this activity, which is all the more reason it was so important that we passed the mental health legislation last year, which includes monies for more mental health services right in the schools where it's often most needed. And I also want to add, we don't have the vaping problem we used to have because my committee passed the Tobacco 21 bill, which has reduced vaping, including in the schools. And I agree, we should not be scaring people and dividing families and parents with these dark visions about what's happening in our schools. Our Board of Ed, our teachers, our administrators are doing a great job.
All right, Ms. Hampton, I think you had raised your hand next.
Yes, and just let me clear the air. You know, I definitely applaud you guys. I think you have wonderful schools. Of course, it's #1 in Connecticut. However, I'm not talking about conspiracy theories when at your board meeting you're talking about This Is Gay book, which has pornographic pictures in it. So how is that a conspiracy theory if they talked about it at your Board of Ed meeting and it's still in the Staples High School library? Okay, so I didn't make that up. And, you know, and I applaud Norwalk for getting the SROs back in the schools, but unfortunately, 1 SRO per 8 schools just does not work out. There's no way you can be in 8 different places at once.
All right, Mr. Riley?
And I do agree with Jonathan. We do have great schools in Westport, and I do love the teachers here. They are great. But I can say one thing, I should be transparency between parents and teachers, and I always advocate for our children to learn math, reading, and writing. And I want our children to be educated, not indoctrinated. And I understand with the gun laws, Democrats, they do vote to remove the police officer out of the schools. And they always defund the police. And we say, like, we're for safety, guns, and I see it. But police, they want to defund them. Those are the ones that keep us safe and keep our children safe. And they're against them. So guns can kill. Our people behind, there's guns, they're killing and shooting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That is answers and rebuttals from everyone on that question as well. This may be the last question before closing, I don't know. It starts with Ms. Hampton first. There are increasing concerns about the possible impacts of climate change on our coastal communities. How should Connecticut address this issue?
Well, we should all care about the environment. You know, the world's heating up and there's no doubt about that. We can see what's happening around us, right? But remember, we have been having these conversations since the 1970s. No one is denying climate change. Now, electric cars being the solution, I think they're great when they work. You know, here's my concerns. Charging stations run on a power grid. And what really concerns me is the life costs and disposal of these batteries. I don't know anyone that has an extra $26,000 laying around to replace their car battery. Not to mention the safety issue of these batteries when they catch on fire, like that one recently in Darien. So listen, do we move in that direction? Absolutely. But not to the harm of the people who are out working, driving trucks just to make a living. As far as supporting climate change curriculum, well, I would have to see it. But I would say we should all do our part in protecting the earth. I don't know anybody who doesn't want clean air, clean water, and safe food production.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you very much. I've been very proud as a member of the Norwalk Council to be a leader in Norwalk on this issue. I know this is an issue that matters so much to Westport. When I've been talking with Westporters on their doorstep, especially in Old Hill, climate is front and center on their mind because it's about the type of planet we're going to be able to hand down to our children and the next generations. I proposed and garnered support for our city's first climate action plan, and we ushered that through, and we're using ARPA funding to pay for that. That's going to be able to help us identify some of the places, the businesses, the homes that are going to be most affected by flooding in the coming years, and especially with sea level rises in the sound that we know is coming as well. We also have in the 143rd District, as you all well know, a lot of inland flooding because we have flooding in the streams. In fact, the first selectwoman today just made an announcement about that work here in Westport, and I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with you on this issue as well, because there are no borders when it comes to our waterways. It will find a way, and we have unprecedented flooding in some of our homes as well. Some of the folks I've spoken with, 30 years, and this is the first time they're seeing water in their basement. We also have to make sure that our energy supply, because of the rise of certain uncertain world events, that we make sure about delivery prices for our fuel this winter pushes us further toward investing in renewable energy. We need to hold, Eversource more accountable for their pricing. Addressing air pollution, because so much of the district abuts 95, also should further incentivize our use of renewables. We had a solar program in Norwalk I was very proud to champion. It was really successful, but I think we should do more of that as well. Promoting our electric grid reliability and energy affordability, we should ramp up our commercial and industrial energy storage solutions using battery incentive programs as well. And lastly, I'm really proud to have been endorsed by the Sierra Club and the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters as your environmental champion in this district. And I want to make sure I advocate for these improvements in preparedness for storms and flood mitigation moving forward as your voice in Hartford. Thank you.
Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. I've also been endorsed by the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club. I have been one of their legislative champions for years. I should also point out that Westport has a tremendous environmental studies program. My daughter went through that, and they create tomorrow's leaders when it comes to the environment. I agree we have to do a lot to encourage the use of renewable energy. I think what we're doing in New London, creating a place where we're going to be building the wind turbines of tomorrow, will be great. I'm a big fan of solar. The current commissioner of DEEP dubbed me the godfather of community solar for my efforts there. I also believe very strongly in the hydrogen industry here in the state. I think I've also been involved with environmental health issues, securing hundreds of millions of dollars for replacing HVAC systems in the schools so they don't have a problem like we did with Coleytown Middle. And I also sit on the lead remediation and mitigation program to get lead out of homes and create healthy home programs. I've been a leader on water issues, getting PFAS out of our water system, the creation of a state water plan, also dealing with water conservation and water quality issues. I think the flooding issue that Dominique brought up is critically important here in Westport. I've been campaigning on that for some time. It's not just along the shoreline or along the rivers. We have a number of neighborhoods which were probably overbuilt, but have real issues with flooding that we need to address. I would also say this is a little obscure. ISO New England, which is responsible for the capacity market, needs to change the way they're doing business to integrate renewable energy into their considerations for how they're going to come up with supply here in the state, so we're not so reliant on natural gas. That's something I'm going to work on in the next session. And let me just end by saying, this whole talk about batteries catching on fire and costing $26,000 is a bunch of hooey. The battery research that's going on now is bringing down the costs, bringing down the weight, and we're going to deal with all those issues, and we're not going to need to use lithium forever. We're going to move to manganese and nickel. Bye.
That's time. Ms. Sorelli.
Climate change is a serious issue. We all want to have a clean air, clean water. We all want to have a beautiful environment. But we must be careful not to take action that would significantly help solve the issue that impose high costs in Connecticut's residents. I believe we have to look closely at nuclear power generation. We have to be cautious about imposing mandates on Connecticut to shift to electric vehicles before we have a cost-effective power grid to change them. Right now, our laws reflect the California's mandates. We should immediately change that. We have a different climate here in California. It's different. So if we mandate cars in the state of Connecticut, and we're driving in the middle of the winter, middle of the blizzard, and then the battery dies, which it doesn't last long during the winter, you know the consequences. So the first thing we should do, we should cut tie with the California's mandates. We are different state here and different climate. And it's very expensive, actually. But look at what happened during the hurricane in Florida. How electric cars exploded. And here in Fairfield, it took the firemen to 45 minutes to put the fire out. So we can't mandate electric cars, and we cannot follow California mandates.
All right, rebuttals. Mr. Steinberg.
Again, battery technology is advancing almost as we speak, so a lot of this is just distraction. I also want to get back to waste management. We do have a problem with disposing waste in our state. We can't burn it or bury it anymore. We can't send it to China or India. We have to deal with our own issues. One of the things that I'm so proud of Westport is that our elementary school students actually pioneered separating out organics from trash. I think there's a huge opportunity to create an entire network for getting organics out of the waste stream, which makes the other elements easier to recycle, and we can also use it to generate energy. I was among the leaders on the RTM to get the plastic bags banned. We did the same thing at the state level. We've gotten rid of microbeads. We're working on straws. We're trying to get plastic out of there, and we need to have extended product responsibility so manufacturers take responsibility for all the garbage they create.
All right, anything further? Any rebuttal from anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you can fact check the battery that caught on fire in Darien on News Channel 12, because it was definitely on News Channel 12. And you know, yes, the environment is so important, right? But I also think that maybe we should stop the overdevelopment of our community so that we can protect the greenery and our environment. You know, and exactly what I tell my daughter, we all need to take care of the earth. You know, we need to throw our trash out. We need to recycle. I'm worried about people running their sprinklers all day long. Or definitely the raw sewage issue that we have in Norwalk. What are my solutions? We all need to do our part. Also, let's tax the corporate polluters that, you know, pollute our air on purpose. They should be taxed for that. You know, they're also purposely causing harm. So yes, the environment is very important, but we definitely have to look at other issues such as overdevelopment of our community.
All right, anybody, any further rebuttal or extension on this? All right, at this point, I'm going to ask the yes/no questions. Get your signs ready. All right. Again, do you support tolls on I-95?
For trucks.
Tolls on I-95, thank you. Now, next question. Do you support Connecticut continuing as a safe harbor for women seeking abortions? And lastly, should Connecticut pass laws permitting early voting? All right, thank you all very much. We now get to closing statements. 2 minutes each, no rebuttal. All right, I'm going to exercise moderator's privilege and work from the far end of the table down. Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you, Westporters, for giving me the support I've needed to fight for our future and for our rights. You have backed me to take on the tough issues, and I've listened to you. Our state is finally on the right path for stability and future growth, and it wasn't easy. Before you elected me, Connecticut lacked budget discipline. I pushed for putting budget controls in place to manage spending. These controls have made it possible to rebuild our rainy day fund, so we're in a better position than virtually any other state in the country when the recession comes next year, and it will. We've cut taxes, particularly for seniors and those on fixed income. We paid down our pension debts, our biggest budget problem, to the tune of $6 billion, freeing up almost $500 million a year to invest in programs or to continue to cut taxes. And now we're upgrading our infrastructure as we need to, transportation, the electric grid, broadband capacity. We must modernize if we're going to attract and retain jobs and maintain our quality of life. Despite my opponent's false claims, I don't cater to special interests. I listen to the voters. I listen to Westporters. You elected me to tackle the tough issues, and I have. My record is clear. I've guaranteed women's reproductive rights. I've fought crime with sensible gun safety reforms. I've protected our children with greater funding for mental health services and strengthening our public schools, and by restricting vaping and fighting the opioid epidemic. My experience in business, which is much more extensive than my opponent's, matters when I work on behalf of small businesses and collaborate with my colleagues to bring jobs and tourism to Connecticut. Businesses and families will not continue to move here unless we promote our low crime rate, the quality of life we offer, and our tremendous schools and our highly skilled workforce. I would like to thank all the employees who work here in our town, the police, fire, schools, and towns. You're doing a great job. Let's keep Connecticut moving forward. I hope I can count on your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sorelli.
This is what I'm going to do if you elect me. I will support women's right to choose. I will support our gun laws. I will insist on parents' rights in school. I will refuse to support sex education to kindergartens. I will not support COVID vaccine mandates on children. I will not mandate masks on children. I will not support closing our schools again. I will oppose regionalizing our schools. I will work to make our spending cap effective so we have discipline on spending and taxes. I'm going to do everything I can to get the prevailing wage ended so we can stop wasting dollars by giving it to cronies. If we do that, we'll have the money we need to spend on transportation, all things we need. Without tolls, without taxes. People often ask, how do we get the cost of living in Connecticut down? Since Jonathan has been in the office, government has increased the amount of taxes we send to Hartford from $161 to $264 million. That's the 64% increase, while the cost of living has gone up by 18%. The cost of our government under Jonathan has gone up 3 times the rate of the inflation. What are we getting for that? Nothing. I'm Alma Sorelli. I immigrated to U.S. 22 years ago. One of the proudest moments was when I became U.S. citizen. And I'm proud to say I am living the American dream. I want all our children to live the American dream. If you send me to Hartford, I will work with all parties. I was raised by a teacher and a peacemaker who brought people together. I have followed my father's legacy. I will work for Westport. You will be my boss, not the Hartford cronies. Vote Alma Sorelli, November 8th. Thank you. I hope I have your support. I hope we can change. I hope we can do better.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
Thank you for hosting tonight's event, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm Nicole Hampton, and I've been going door to door talking with our friends and neighbors. The issues that keep coming up are common sense public safety. Shows the Democrat police accountability bill harms our citizens since the police are not allowed to do their job. Does it make common sense that if your car is stolen, a police officer can't do anything about it until it ends up in the chop shop? My opponent thinks it's fine, actually voted to defund the police, thus earning her endorsement by the Working Families Party. And my common sense approaches earn the endorsement of Republicans and independents. Let me ask you, if someone breaks into your home or your car or assaults your parent, who are you going to call? I want you to know that I will fight and care for retired and elderly. They're afraid. They're afraid of being taxed out of their home. They're afraid of being harmed by violence due to the explosion of marijuana use that my opponent co-authored and endorsed. They're afraid of liberal policies that will tax their pension, their income, and their home. When I go door to door, another issue just this week is the Democrat-endorsed division of our community that my opponent not only supports, but also celebrated. Recently in Norwalk, my opponent spearheaded hiring a chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, who by her own admissions says that we need to do away with all the whiteness. That means you. I will not allow my daughter to be indoctrinated to pump her fist in the air to the detriment of our friends and neighbors. My opponent hired this new DEI officer as a last-ditch effort to pander to the Black community. This hire sets the Black and brown community back over 30 years, and it breaks my heart. Hate has no place in our community. I'm Nicole Hampton, and I'm asking for your vote November 8th for State Rep, District 143rd.
Thank you. Ms. Norman?
I will begin with a slight rebuttal. This is such a dark vision of our community. This is not a vision you deserve, Norwalk and Westport. I have never said such thing. I never voted to defund the police. In fact, I voted to give the police the tools they need.
I thought they said no rebuttals.
Reclaim my time. Thank you. Reclaim my time, please. Let me talk to you about what matters to me. I'm an optimist. I'm a hard worker. I want to give back to my community. I've been doing this work in Norwalk with compassion, respect, and delivering results to the people of Norwalk now for almost 3 years. I grew up in the Midwest where I watched my grandmother's hard work. She worked growing up on a farm, she worked as a waitress, and then she worked in a toothbrush factory. And one of my favorite stories about her is that it was her that her brothers called up to in the farmhouse to pull up her boots, get down, and help them push the car out of the mud. I'm gonna pull up my boots for you, Westport, the same way I've been doing in Norwalk for the past 3 years. These work hard, give back values are what led me to make sure that I'm talking with an open heart and open ears to everyone in this district. Republicans, independents, unaffiliated, Democrats, we all know that we want the same thing. We want safe communities for our children. We want fabulous schools so they have a future, and this needs to be a future of their own creation, not a dark past that's going to be handed down to them, the past that my opponent is describing. My opponent, again, detached from reality. But let me give you a reality. It's the future we're going to build together. I've worked on the climate plan in Norwalk. I've made sure that we had housing insecurity better addressed by making sure that we included those most impacted. That includes our veterans, persons with disabilities, and LGBTQ Norwalkers to make sure they're protected in our non-discrimination protections. And lastly, I ushered in ARPA funding, $1.5 million alone of it being for mental health and addiction services. That's funding that went straight into our communities, right through the nonprofits. I'm Dominic Johnson. I'm proud to be your neighbor. I will report directly to you. You are my boss. Please find me on your ballot at Saugatuck this Tuesday, November 8th. I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you so much, Westport, for having us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, all the candidates. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, and those of you who are watching, you know what I'm going to say. You have heard the candidates, and in many cases, their positions have been extremely enlightening. But now it's up to you. Go vote November 8th. Thank you.
Vote red, November 8th.